People often believe that when you finally get away from a narcissist, the story ends there. That's incorrect. That's where the real story starts. Because when a narcissist understands they can no longer manage you, they don't just leave without a fuss. No, they fall apart. Their pretense starts to crack. And what comes out next is both disturbing and revealing. In this lecture, we're going to look at the 4 clear signs that show you've truly beaten the narcissist. Not just gotten free of their hold, but broken down the very illusion they live inside. By the end of this video, you'll understand not only what those signs are, but why they appear and what they show about the fragile psychology behind the narcissist's pretense. When you finally stand up to someone who's been manipulating you, when you stop playing the game, something very interesting happens. The narcissist's charm, that fake, smooth pleasantness, begins to melt away, and what replaces it isn't easy agreement or quiet respect. It's fury, silent fury. It's the fury of someone who has lost management, but must not reveal it in public. And that right there is one of the clearest signs that you've actually beaten them for real. See, people misunderstand the narcissist's charm. They think it's real confidence. They think it's charisma, strength, dominance. But it's not. It's an act. It's a carefully constructed show designed to draw you in, to make you admire them, depend on them, need them. Their charm is a weapon. It's not about connection, it's about management. And the moment you stop reacting to it, when you stop being mesmerized by their flattery or scared by their presence, their entire psychological structure begins to break. Now, this doesn't mean they'll suddenly start shouting or throwing things. No, the truly dangerous kind of fury doesn't always make noise. It hides behind the eyes. You'll see it when you talk to them. The tight smile, the twitch at the corner of the mouth, the way their tone flattens when they realize you're not playing along anymore. It's as if you've turned on a light in a room they've kept dark for years and suddenly they're exposed. They can't charm you. They can't guilt you. They can't make you feel small. And that's unbearable to them. Let me tell you something. That silent fury is not about you. It's about what you represent. You've become the one thing they can't manage. And that threatens the entire illusion they've built to protect themselves from the truth. Narcissists live in a fragile, self-made world. It's like a house of mirrors. Everything reflects back what they want to see. Power, admiration, superiority. But when you step outside that illusion and say, no, I see who you truly are, it's like smashing one of those mirrors. The entire structure begins to shake. And that's when they change. Suddenly, the voice that used to sound confident becomes clipped and tense. The person who used to laugh at your jokes now gives you a look as if you've insulted them. Their silence grows hard. You might even feel it, a kind of cold, invisible wall building between you. They won't admit they're angry because to do so would mean admitting defeat. But their energy tells the truth. That's the silent fury. It's the emotional equivalent of a tempest trapped behind a pain. I once spoke with someone, a young woman, who told me about leaving a long relationship with a deeply narcissistic partner. She said that when she finally stood her ground, refused to argue, and walked away mid-conversation, he didn't yell. He didn't chase her. He just stared at her with this strange, hollow look, and then went completely quiet. And she said, "It was the quietest moment of my life, but it was the loudest thing I'd ever felt." That's the moment the narcissist understands they've lost. Not because you shouted louder or played their game better, but because you stopped playing at all. And here's what's even more fascinating. That silence isn't just anger, it's shame. Underneath all that fury is a profound sense of not being good enough. You've shown them a reflection they can't bear to see. One that says you are not in management, you are not as powerful as you believe. And for someone whose entire identity depends on management and admiration, that realization is unbearable. But listen, this is where your power truly starts. Because when you can recognize that shift, when you can see the charm turn to quiet hostility and not internalize it, not take it personally, you are no longer tied to their manipulation. You've reclaimed something essential: your freedom, your dignity, your peace. And make no mistake, that's exactly what the narcissist fears most. So when you see that silent fury, when their eyes go cold, when their charm evaporates and the air between you turns hard, don't panic. Don't question yourself. Recognize it for what it is: confirmation. It means you've broken their spell. You've stepped out of the illusion. You've stopped feeding the monster that thrived on your confusion. And that's a hard thing to do because it takes courage to stop seeking approval from someone who's built their whole existence around holding it back. It takes strength to stand still when their silence tries to provoke guilt. But if you can hold that ground, if you can stay calm in the presence of their quiet fury, you win. Not by beating them in a fight, but by refusing to be part of the fight at all. That's the real victory. The narcissist's charm turns into silent fury, because for the first time, they've met someone who can't be tricked. And if you're that person, if you've gotten to that point, you've done something most people never do. You've reclaimed your sense of self from someone who tried to rewrite it. And that's the moment you stop surviving them and start moving beyond them. You know, it's a strange thing when you finally begin to rise above a narcissist, when you stop reacting to their games and start living with true power. They don't disappear. They change. And not in some wise, I've learned my lesson kind of way. No, they start copying you. They begin to mirror your power, your confidence, your independence, but only on the surface, because they can't create it from within. They can only mimic it. You have to understand what's really happening here. Narcissists are not original thinkers. They don't build themselves, they borrow themselves. They construct their identity from whatever they can grab from others. Praise, focus, energy, approval. It's like they're constantly scavenging for fragments of selfhood, patching together a personality made entirely out of reflections. So when you beat them, when you stop feeding them, they panic. But rather than face that emptiness, they decide to become you. They take on your tone, your ideas, your behaviors, as if wearing your skin will give them your power. It's a very peculiar thing to watch. Suddenly, the person who used to mock your goals starts talking like they've discovered purpose. The same person who laughed when you tried to better yourself begins posting motivational quotes using your language, your rhythm, your values. It's strange because what they're doing isn't admiration, it's duplication. They're trying to reclaim management by becoming the very thing that broke their illusion. Now, why do they do that? Because copying for them is survival. The narcissist doesn't know who they are without an external model to feed from. Their entire identity is like a parasite. It's a copy of strength, not the embodiment of it. And when you've beaten them, when you've pulled away, built boundaries, developed confidence, you've exposed that truth, you've revealed the emptiness at the center of their being. So they do what empty things do, they echo, but don't mistake that copying for growth. It's not. It's cover. They're trying to mask the humiliation of defeat by pretending they've evolved. It's like a wolf putting on the shepherd's coat and pretending it now cares for the flock. The appearance changes, but the intent doesn't. And if you're not careful, that copying can draw you back in. You might think maybe they've changed, maybe they finally understand, but what's really happening is much darker. They're studying you. They're learning how your power works so they can use it against you. Let me tell you something I've seen over and over again. In students, in therapy rooms, in families. When someone truly begins to grow, the people who depended on their weakness start to copy that growth. Not to share it, but to compete with it. A young man starts to stand up straight, take responsibility, and suddenly his insecure friends start copying his language. Not because they want to better themselves, but because they feel threatened. It's the same dynamic. The narcissist doesn't want to be strong with you. They want to appear stronger than you. And that tells you something profound. Copying is their last line of protection. It's their desperate attempt to preserve the illusion of superiority. But here's the key. They can't sustain it. Because real strength doesn't come from mimicry. It comes from suffering, from facing yourself, from taking responsibility for the chaos in your own life. The narcissist avoids all of that. They can copy your confidence, but they can't stand your self-control. They can copy your words, but not your integrity. So eventually the pretense falls again. It always does. Imagine a person trying to hold a mask to their face with both hands. They can do it for a while, but they can't eat, can't breathe properly, can't live freely while doing it. Eventually, tiredness sets in and the pretense cracks. That's what happens when a narcissist copies your strength. They wear your identity like a disguise until reality demands being real, and then they crumble because they've never built the foundation to support what they're pretending to be. Now, when you see this happen, when the narcissist starts echoing your words, dressing like you, copying your mannerisms, acting like they've suddenly found themselves. Don't get angry. Don't even get confused. Recognize it for what it is, proof of your victory. You've become the standard they measure themselves against. You've become the model they can't outshine. That's power. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that simply is. And if you want to stay free, you have to keep moving. Because the moment you stop, they'll catch up and try to mirror you again. Keep growing. Keep refining yourself. Don't let their copying lure you back into approval. The best way to beat a narcissist twice is to outgrow the version of yourself they're still trying to copy. So when you notice them copying your strengths, smile quietly to yourself, because what they're really saying without ever admitting it is that you've become everything they pretended to be. You've become real. You've become whole. And they can only stand in your shadow trying desperately to recreate your light. One of the most clear moments in the collapse of a narcissist comes when their mask begins to slip in public. It's fascinating and sad because it reveals what's been there all along. A desperate, fragile, frightened self hiding behind the illusion of superiority. For years, maybe even decades, they've perfected that pretense. The charm, the confidence, the perfect timing, the management of every social situation. It's all part of the show. But when you beat them, when you expose their manipulation and refuse to play along, that pretense doesn't just crack privately. It slips in front of others. And that's when the entire illusion begins to collapse. Now, you have to understand what that means for someone like that. The narcissist lives for how they are seen. Their entire identity is built not on who they are, but on how they appear. They don't chase truth, they chase image. And for years, that image works. They can fool people with their charm, with their calculated humility, with their apparent confidence. The moment you step away, the moment you no longer approve that illusion, they begin to lose management over the story they've been telling the world. And when management slips away, so does the pretense. I've seen this countless times. Maybe it's a boss who always seemed calm, clear in speech, in charge. Then suddenly one employee stops submitting to their manipulation, stops accepting unfair treatment, starts standing up for themselves. And one day in a meeting, that boss snaps just for a moment. The calm is gone. The tone sharpens. The eyes go cold. The room falls silent. Everyone feels it. The mask has fallen. And once people see that fracture, they can't unsee it. The illusion of the faultless chief begins to melt right before them. It's the same in personal relationships. The narcissist, who's always so charming with friends, always the center of focus, begins to lose management when the person they used to dominate suddenly speaks the truth. They'll overreact to something small, a comment, a glance, a question, and for a split second, the ugliness underneath shows through. Their tone changes, their posture shifts, and you see that raw hostility that was always there, hidden beneath layers of show, and people notice. That's the moment when the image collapses. You see, a truth has a way of cracking falsehood open. It's like sunlight piercing through a thin layer of ice. The pretense, no matter how smooth, can't withstand exposure to reality. When you refuse to play along with the narcissist's version of the story, you become that sunlight. You expose the gap between who they pretend to be and who they actually are. And that exposure is unbearable for them because what they fear more than anything isn't losing you, it's losing their audience. Let me put it this way. The narcissist's pretense is like a stage costume. It only works when the lights are dim and the audience is far enough away. But once the lights come on, once people step closer and see the seams, the fabric, the makeup underneath, the magic disappears. And when that happens in real life, when their colleagues, friends, or family start to see through them, the narcissist begins to fall apart. They'll lash out, play the victim, or try to repair the mask with frantic explanations. You misunderstood me. You're twisting my words. I was just joking. But the damage is done. People have seen the truth, and once truth is seen, it can't be unseen. Now, that's not just about exposing them. It's about you, because your refusal to feed the illusion is what creates the exposure. You're the one who undoes the magic. You might not even say much. You might simply hold your ground, remain calm, tell the truth. But that calmness, that being real, it acts like a mirror. It reflects reality back to the narcissist and everyone around them. And in that reflection, the pretense begins to melt away. And here's something I want you to understand deeply. When the narcissist's mask slips, it's not just a moment of their defeat. It's a moment of your change, because it means you're no longer trapped in their show. You're standing in truth. You're no longer mesmerized by the image. You're seeing the person behind it. And that's the kind of seeing that changes you permanently. Of course, they'll hate it. They'll feel exposed, humiliated, vulnerable. They might even try to rebuild the mask to regain management of the story. But something irreversible has already happened. Once people see who they truly are, the power of deception fades. It's like a magician performing a trick after you've already seen how it's done. The illusion loses its hold. So when you witness that moment, when the narcissist's mask slips in public, don't fear it. Don't rush to cover it back up out of guilt or empathy. Let it fall, because that moment is truth revealing itself. It's reality correcting the lie. And though it might feel uncomfortable, it's necessary. It's the collapse of falsehood and the beginning of freedom. And maybe that's the real victory here. You don't just beat the narcissist by winning some psychological war. You beat them by exposing what's real, by standing in truth long enough for the mask to crumble under its own weight. And when it does, you'll realize something profound. They never had the power. It was always borrowed from your belief, your focus, your participation. Once you withdraw those things, the illusion collapses, and what's left is the truth. Raw, uncomfortable, but real. And that's the ground where genuine strength begins. You know, when a narcissist finally understands they've been beaten, when they can no longer manipulate, you no longer manage the story, no longer twist reality to fit their ego. They do something extraordinary. They change the story. They become the victim. And not just any victim, the sad one, the not understood one, the one who gave everything and was let down. It's surprising how quickly they change roles. Yesterday, they were the winner. Today, they're the wounded soul. And that change isn't a moment of humility. It's a strategy. It's the last safeguard of a falling ego. See, narcissists can't tolerate being held responsible. To take responsibility for their actions would mean confronting the one thing they've spent their entire lives avoiding, their own shame. It would mean admitting they were wrong, that their illusion of superiority was false, and that's unbearable. So instead, they rewrite the story to protect themselves from that realization. They cast you, the one who got away, the one who spoke the truth, as the bad guy. You become the ungrateful one, the abuser, the cold-hearted betrayer, and they become the hero in their own story once again. Now you might hear them say things like, "After everything I did for you," or "You've changed, you're not who you used to be," and you have to understand what that really means. It doesn't mean you've become cruel, it means you've stopped submitting. It means you've grown, you've developed boundaries, you've stopped feeding their need for management. And that to them feels like betrayal because their version of love is ownership. Their version of connection is doing what they say. And when that ends, they have to twist the story to make themselves look righteous. I've seen this happen in families, in workplaces, in marriages. Someone finally decides to break the cycle, to stop being manipulated, and suddenly the narcissist begins telling a different story to everyone around them. I don't know what happened. They just turned against me, or they're ungrateful after everything I've done. They start painting themselves as the honorable victim, the one who loved too much, gave too much, cared too much. It's a brilliant show, and it often works at least for a while because most people don't see through it. They see the tears, the trembling voice, the self-pity, and they believe it. But here's the truth. What you're witnessing in that moment isn't sincerity, it's self-preservation. It's the narcissist trying to repair the shattered mirror of their self-image. They can't look into a mirror that reflects their failure. So they change the reflection. They paint themselves as the victim so they don't have to face the reality that they've been beaten not by cruelty but by truth. And that's why their storytelling becomes so convincing because they need to believe it. It's the only way they can live with themselves. Think about it like this. The narcissist's identity is like a novel they've been writing their entire life. In that novel, they are always the hero. Brilliant, misunderstood, chosen, powerful. But then you come along and refuse to play your assigned role. You won't be the admirer, the rescuer, or the scapegoat anymore. You put the book down. You walk away, and they panic because without your participation, the story falls apart. So what do? They rewrite it. They take the same events, twist the dialogue, and publish a new version, one where you're the bad guy and they're the victimized hero. And here's the part that's hard to accept. They'll tell that story to everyone, friends, coworkers, family, anyone who will listen. They'll do it with such conviction that even you might start doubting yourself. You'll think, maybe I was too harsh, maybe I overreacted. But you weren't. You were simply refusing to carry a burden that was never yours to carry. And you have to remember that, especially when they use sympathy as a weapon to regain management. You see, when they play the victim, they're not seeking healing. They're seeking allies. They want people to pity them, not to change, because pity gives them something very close to what they lost: focus, approval, emotional power. It feeds them. It keeps the illusion alive. So when they start rewriting the story, don't waste your energy trying to edit their version. You can't argue someone out of a lie they need to believe. Instead, live your truth. Let time do its work, because truth has endurance and lies don't. Over time, the inconsistencies in their story will begin to show. People will notice, the act will wear thin, and while they're busy defending their made-up tale, you'll be busy building a real life, one based on authenticity, not show. So when the narcissist rewrites the story to make themselves the victim, don't fight to be understood by them. You can't be. Their story isn't about truth, it's about survival. Let them have their made-up tale, because in the end, your freedom doesn't depend on them telling the truth. It depends on you living it. And if you stay true to that, something remarkable happens. Their rewritten story starts to collapse under the weight of your reality. That's when you realize you've truly beaten them. Not when they admit they were wrong, because they never will, but when their story stops mattering, when you no longer need to defend yourself, when you stop caring what they say, when you look at their self-made tragedy and feel nothing but distance. That's freedom, that's peace. And that's the moment you stop being a character in their story and start being the author of your own. So now you have to ask yourself, what story are you still living in? Are you still trapped inside someone else's version of events, trying to prove your innocence in a play that was never real to begin with? Or have you finally decided to step off their stage and start writing your own script, one grounded in truth, not manipulation? Because that's where your freedom starts. When you stop defending yourself against lies and start living a life that makes the lies irrelevant. You see, beating a narcissist isn't about revenge or humiliation. It's about going beyond them. It's about becoming so anchored in what's true, in what's real, that their illusions can no longer touch you. You stop being their mirror, you stop being their fuel, and the world begins to rearrange itself around that truth, quietly, steadily, powerfully. So, I want you to think right now, who are you without their story, without their approval, without their manipulation, without their false praise? Because until you know that you're still carrying them inside you, and maybe it's time to finally let that go. If this message struck something deep in you, if you've lived through that rewriting of the truth and found your way back to yourself, tell me your story in the comments. Speak your truth, because every person who finds the courage to do that gives others permission to do the same. And if you want to keep walking this path to understand human nature, power, and truth more deeply, subscribe. Join this community. There's more to learn, more to uncover, and maybe more of you to discover.